Okay, so the first thing we want to do is make sure that our power shut off and that we've made sure that we got the right circuit. So a couple ways you can do that is make sure on your circuit breaker panel that you shut off the one that says that's labeled for furnace. Should be a single breaker, 15 amp. So you'd shut that off. One way is you can come over, your switch is probably going to be on. Sometimes if you shut it off, you can hear a little click if there's actually power still there. If you don't hear anything, go check your thermostat. You can try turning up your thermostat. And then the next thing would be to pull this off, and we're going to check it with a voltmeter and make sure that there is no power before we proceed. Okay, so I'm going to pull this light switch cover off here, and sometimes these will be painted red. It's just to indicate that that's the emergency on-off switch for the furnace. I'm not sure if there's a mandate in certain states that require that. I've heard New Jersey and I think maybe New Hampshire might have that. Okay, so now before we proceed any further, we're going to want to check and make sure that our power is out and shut off. So I like to use the flute volt sticks for checking power, and on this it's kind of hard to see on the camera there, but on the right hand side of this switch is where the terminals are. If I put my flute in here, it's not lighting up. This would light up normally if there was power. The other option would be to check the plug at the bottom, but I can see there's no power in here. It's not lit up. You always want to verify your little voltage detector on a live circuit, a known circuit that works, and make sure it lights up first before you do it. This one you can kind of shake it. I can tell the batteries are still good. But for example, pull this extension cord up here I got. So this is the extension cord I have. I got power. You can see it lights up. So I know this is working properly and that we don't have any power here. The other option is to use actual like voltmeter, where you will test it to ground and everything like that. But now we know we're safe, so we can proceed further. So what we're going to want to do now is pull the switch off and out. And what we want to do is pull this straight out, kind of pull on it here. Okay, so I just want to get a different camera angle here to get a little easier to see inside our junction box. Here is what we're going to use this as. So where our switch is at, if you'll follow me here, we got our power coming in on the top. So it's coming from our circuit breaker. There's a black, white, and a bare ground copper wire coming in. So black comes in. I'll pull this kind of out here, and it's going into this wire nut, which has two other wires coming out of it. So this one comes in the top, or comes out, goes into our switch, goes through the switch, and it goes straight in to our furnace right here. So one black hot wire goes through the switch to the furnace. The other black hot wire goes down in the bottom conduit here, which leads down to our outlet, to our receptacle at the bottom. So if we look a little further, we'll pull our ground out here. Ground just got a bunch of bare copper wires on it. One's coming from our circuit breaker. It goes in, and then there's three coming out. One goes to the switch, one goes to the furnace, side. One goes down to our outlet receptacle, and then the other one goes to the case. So this, which you may or may not have. So it just depends on how it's wired. So I got 3 bare copper, and there's one green one, which is going to this case. And then the only other wire we have in here is going to be our neutral wires. Pull our neutral wires. You can see that there. So our neutral wire, again, we got our neutral wire coming from our circuit breaker, goes into the wire nut, and we have 2 coming out. One that goes to the furnace, right through the back of the box here, and the other one goes down into the lower conduit, which goes down to our receptacle outlet. So it's pretty basic. The big thing is you just want to keep in mind on kind of what's going to where, and you just keep track of the proper wires. But a lot of times with these, it's pretty simple. You know, there's not a lot to it. But like I said, there's a lot of wires already in this box if we're going to try to keep this existing switch. Generally, in this kind of circumstances, I recommend to leave this box as your junction box, and we'll wire it up with the transfer switch next to it here, and then we'll remove this switch. So we're going to do that next. So on the side of this, I'll just show you real quick here like this. It'll probably be the easier way to do it. If you see, we got 3 knockouts. 1, 2, 3. Sometimes you only have one. One on top, one on the bottom. Since these ones are already being used, I usually like to come in on the bottom. But in this case, with our switch here, we're just going to knock this one out and just use a hammer. And I like to just use a screwdriver. And if you see there's a weld right where the weld is, you want to go on the opposite side of the weld. Sometimes I'll have 2 welds. Those ones are a pain to get out. The ones that have just a single welds are easier. So this is basically pretty much broken all along around here. You just got to pound it out and then use some pliers to pull it out. Okay, so now that we got the hole knocked out, what we need to mount the transfer switch. Now there's a couple ways you can do it. You can shorten up your conduit if you want. You can put it kind of, you know, right there. If I had this furnace actually a little bit bigger or a different location, I think we'd kind of do a couple things. So what I'm going to do is actually have this where I'm not going to cut the conduit all. I'm just going to leave it where it's at and run this in, and we'll figure out kind of how the conduit kind of lays where the switch is going to be. So what I want to do is get this conduit fed into our squeeze clamp. So the first thing I want to do, I'm going to pull this nut off, and I want to loosen these screws up. That are on here. I'm just going to do this by hand here. You don't have to actually pull off this cover, and I'm having a hard time with this. That one, there it goes. So I just kind of go till, kind of see it there. The screws are still threaded in there, but there's a big opening. So when you feed the wire in, you want to keep everything together, and here's the trick. Let's see if I can get this. You take this and like bend it with your thumb, and bend it over. And just get a real tight little radius there, like that. And just kind of feed it in there. It should pull right through. Just like that. So I'm going to go all the way to the clamp, pull this on there, and you'll see in the wiring, or in our conduit, it's got this little orange little plug that's called anti-short bushing. That's just so any sharp edges on the conduit won't chafe the wire and short it out. So should be able to get that pushed in there. And I'm going to go ahead and secure that down, and then just screw it down till it's tight. So now we got that on there. I'm going to go ahead and mount this up. Like I said, what I'm going to do, I think, is mount it up over here, like that. So, easiest way is just put our wire through and kind of pull these other ones. What I want to do is get it where it's, yeah, there you go, all by itself there. And we're going to grab our lock nut. And usually they're double-sided. That one's a different one. They have little perforations, little side things on them that kind of catch. I think all these ones are double-sided, so it really doesn't matter which way you go. Now I'm going to get that nut on there. Easier said than done sometimes. Like I said, that's why you kind of want to move this switch, because there's not a lot of room. I forgot to mention that you might have a double box, so you might have it where your switch and light are in the exact same one. You've got a 4" by 4" box. Those leave you a lot more room. I like those a lot more. I kind of wanted to show this setup because this is the most common. So now I just got that kind of finger tight on there. What I'm going to do, zoom out here a little bit. I'm going to try to figure out, just by keeping this loose, kind of see where we want to mount this up. So we'll just pretend this is the furnace, and then this is like, you know, like our sidewall. So another thing that's kind of come down here. We can tuck it all the way in if we want. I think that's where we'll put it right there, and you can't see it on the camera, so I'm going to switch it up for you. Okay, so what we're going to do is we can kind of, by keeping this conduit without having to cut it, just for this video, you know, that's kind of one spot where we can put it at, just like that. Keeps it all nice and tucked in. Still actually showing it on our furnace, our drawing. If I would have made it bigger, would have made it look a little nicer, but I'm just going to tuck it in there. So if you're doing it on sheet metal, what's included on the screws are these little Tech screws. They got the tip of them look like a drill point. Now we'll drill straight in through sheet metal if you're using power drill. Try and do it by hand, it just won't happen. You won't get the speed. So you're gonna have to use a drill to screw these in. So we could use these, and we could screw these right in on those. And our other option, there's other screws called wall dogs, and I really love these. You know, it's a lot more than just regular screws and drywall stuff, but I like them so much I include them. And what these are is that this will go through virtually any surface. They'll mount to any surface minus like sheet metal. And these got these big kind of screws on here. You can screw this right into drywall if you're doing it right on a wall. You can also go right into concrete if you have a concrete wall. You do have to use a drill bit. I think it's a 3/16 if I remember right. Drill bit. It's in the directions and instruction manual. But you could pre-drill the concrete and then screw this right in. It'll also screw right into this wood. We got, I think this is 3/4 inch plywood I got here. So hopefully it won't break. We're going to see how strong these are. See if we can throw a couple of them in and mount this up. We'll find out how strong these screws are. I've actually never screwed them in without pre-drilling on plywood. I've done it through drywall. I mean, I know that that's what their claim to fame is that you can drill it right through. But you know, a lot of times when you use regular screws, unless you got a really heavy deck screw, the screw head will split. So let's hope that doesn't happen this time. So there's 4 mounting holes on this, 2 on top, 2 on the bottom. And what I'm going to do is just try to tuck this in as square as I can. I'm just going to right there. Yeah, those are awesome. So that screwed right in. So you'd want to put in another one, and there's 2 more on the bottom. I'm going to screw 1 more in here. Screw it on top. How not to drill it, huh? So, there, we got it mounted. We're just going to call that good for now. We got our wiring coming through. And what we're going to want to do is tighten that up. Preferably with a pair of channel locks. Do that till that's snug. We got that there. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Okay, so the first thing I want to do, now we got everything wired, all the wires are ready to go, is we're going to pull off our old switch. So depending on how your wires are in the switch, you might have holes depending on the configuration. Some of them have holes in the back of the switches where the wire just goes straight in. And a lot of times you need a little tiny screwdriver to release those. And if not, I would just cut them flush. Save as much wire as you can. So if this is your first time wiring, I recommend that you pay attention what wire goes to where. And basically just write it down. You can just write it down right on your furnace or on a wall, so it's handy. You say black wire go into furnace from here. So I know this is coming through our hole that's in the middle, and this is what's going to our furnace inside. So go ahead and just leave that there. And then the other one here, this is coming from our conduit. And I'm just going to disconnect our ground. That's all that's on the switch. There's no neutral on the switch. So now our switch is done. I'm going to pull that out. What we're going to do is just go 1 wire at a time and make it easy for us. So let's get our ground out of the way. That'll be the easiest. So I'm going to pull, we got our bare ground here. What we're going to do is pull that wire nut off. And there's wire nuts included in the package, 5 of them. This red one, I believe, is a little bit bigger than these tan ones. So this is our ground coming off. So I'm just going to toss that one. We have our green wire. Go ahead and pull the tape off of this. We have our green wire. That's our ground. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of tuck these out of the way. We're just going to tie these all into the ground wires here. I'm going to cut this down a little bit. I want a little bit of slack, but not a whole lot. So I'm going to cut that down, probably about right there. That's a good spot. And then we're going to strip that. with our wire strippers, you want to strip off about a 1/2 inch. And if you're using just standard strippers like this, you'll look, a lot of them will say solid on one side and stranded. So the solid numbers are actually a little bit different than your stranded. So this is stranded wire, and this is 14 gauge, so I'm going to go to the 14. And I'm not going to show any real close-ups on the wiring if you want to see that in some of the other videos. But anywhere from about 1/2 inch to 5/8. When you're putting them in a wire net, you kind of need a little bit more. So because this is stranded, I don't need to pre-twist it on here. So all I'm going to do is just kind of, I want to figure out kind of where I want it. You can kind of feed it behind wires if you want. But I think what we'll do is we'll move, yeah, maybe I'll do that. See if I can get it behind or not. Make it easier. Yeah. What I'm going to do is actually pull this ground so it's behind and underneath here. I'm just going to put this, lay this on here and kind of twist them together a little bit. Going. Do it till it's real tight, and usually a lot of times you start twisting it and the wires will start twisting on themselves. It's a good sign that you got it good enough. Okay, so now we got the ground all wired in. What I'm going to do is just take this and kind of bend it a little bit and push it back and tuck it in. Our ground wire all the way in there. Okay. Okay, so next we're going to do our hot. It's our black. So I'm going to pull this wire nut off here. I'm just going to kind of twist this till it kind of comes apart. Or kind of, you might have to use pliers. Okay, so we pulled the wire off. Another one, the wire nut. So if you follow this, we got our black, our hot coming in. It's going around and it's feeding this other black wire, which is going down to our outlet receptacle. So on that, when our power's off, we're not going to have any power coming here. If we try to wire this up directly going to the transfer switch, when we're running the transfer switch on generator power, we're not going to get power to our outlet. So what we're going to need to do is separate these, untwist them, because they're solid wires. They're generally, if the electrician did it right, should be wired up kind of together. Now there's a couple different ways your switch can be wired, the old switch I should say. Now it could have been like this one, it was feeding power to these, going and then going to the switch, and then the switch was only controlling the furnace. It is possible that they could have wired it where the power went to here and then coming out it went to your outlet receptacle as well. So that way when you had it shut off there was no power at the outlet or receptacle. So that is the other way it could have been. Generally you'll see it where it's wired directly and the switch only controls the furnace. So now we got, look at all our blacks. We got our black from our furnace. We got our black going to our outlet or receptacle, and then the black coming from our circuit breaker. So this is our power coming in. This wire needs to hook up to the red wire. Red wire is our power coming from the circuit breaker going to the transfer switch. So for this we only need one wire. So this wire is kind of twisted up a little bit. What I'm going to do is straighten it out. It's also really long because it was wired to be twisted around with other solids. It's a lot longer than I want it for the wire nut. It could protrude a little bit out the bottom, so I'm going to trim off just a little bit. And then we're going to grab our red wire. And what I like to do is just kind of tuck it where it starts tucking in. You kind of feel the end of it where it needs to be, so it's all even. And we're going to cut that one right there. And we're going to strip it just as we did the green wire. About a 1/2 inch. And you're going to take one of the tan wire nuts that comes with the installation package. You're going to hold these wires where they're at the same point, same level. You can just pull that over there and just start twisting. And you want to hold these wires real good so one kind of doesn't overtake the other. And you get to a point where when you start twisting it that they'll start twisting over each other. And I like to go a couple times like that. Okay, so now we got that. So we can try and truck that in if we want. I'm just going to kind of push it off to the side. Okay, so now what we want to do is the other side of that hop. So that red wire that goes into our transfer switch down below here, and then comes back out when we're in the main line position. It comes back out as this black wire. So on this black wire, we want to connect it up to the last two of our other black wires. One going to the receptacle or outlet, the other one that's going to the furnace. So this one's got kind of a curly cue on it from being twisted in to the switch. I'm just going to kind of straighten that out a little bit. It's the right length. It's still pretty long that we need to kind of wrap these together. And what you're going to want to do is get some pliers like this that kind of have a square end is ideal. If you have just needle nose or some channel locks, that's fine. You want to do the same thing where you get them about even. Sometimes you can kind of get them pre-started. Then take your pliers and just twist them until they kind of twist around each other. Now if you get one where they get kind of almost like a rabbit ear kind of going at the end, what you're going to want to do is grab your pliers, your cutters, and just cut kind of one little lip of it so it makes a more finer close point. Now we want to grab our black wire coming from our transfer switch, and we're going to do the same thing. Just going to find a little spot right where it's kind of pushing in, and we still got a little extra, and we're going to cut that. Strip that wire. Go in, hold it at the end, kind of hold it where it will twist it a little bit. Kind of, big thing is you don't want it to stick out too much, but I'm kind of pre-wrapping it just however the copper wire is already kind of wrapped, so it kind of fits into a groove. And then grab another tan wire nut. Go ahead and crank that down. Well, now we got that one. So now all we got left is our neutrals. Now there's two ways to wire your transfer switch up. It's called neutral switching and bonded neutral. So you have to read the instruction manual, and it will explain kind of two different ways to wire that and what you need to do. So one way is where basically you're not using the neutral switching. Depending on your furnace, some high efficiency furnaces, the way the flame sensor works is that they need to see the neutral and the ground, what's called bonded, so basically together. When you switch these, then it won't be bonded, and sometimes your furnace won't operate. Sometimes there's circuit breaker on your little generator. If it's like a little Honda, sometimes those will trip off or will show a ground fault. So just so you know that there's two different options for wiring. If you were going to do the bonded, basically you just trim these and then wire nut them together. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just kind of cut these at the same length here. Now I got those trimmed. I'm going to undo this wire nut. And so if we're going to put these all together, all we have to do is strip these, put it on there. Now if we want to do a switch neutral, we'd basically be doing the exact same thing as we did with our hots, where we have to pay attention to which one is the one coming in from our circuit breaker, and that one would connect to our blue with white, or white with blue I should say. That's basically the incoming. It goes in through the transfer switch, and then it comes out of the transfer switch as the all white. And then the all white wire would connect to the remaining two white wires on here. So let's do that, because that would probably be the most common way and the way we recommend for you to wire it the first time. If after you wire this it does not operate properly, then I'd recommend to tie them all together. So on this one, what I want to do is, again, undo it so they're all separate. So I got my white wire here that's coming from our circuit breaker. What I'm going to do is just do as I did before and just kind of straighten it out a little bit. I'm going to grab the white wire with the blue stripe. This is what we want. The wire goes incoming to the switch, transfer switch. I'm going to strip off about a 1/2 inch. Grab another gray wire nut. Now you can see if you try to have the existing switch in there, you wouldn't have a whole lot of room. Just going to kind of hold that on there so they're at the same point. Hold them real tight while I twist this on here until they start twisting together. So now we have our white wire coming from our furnace that goes into the furnace, and then the white wire that goes down to our outlet, and then the white wire coming from the transfer switch. So this is the output. So on these solid wires, we're going to want to twist these together again. And they kind of already have a little bit of a pre-twist from before, but I kind of need to redo it again just to make sure that the edges are the same. There we go. I'm going to strip this white wire, the all white wire, again about a 1/2 inch. Grab the gray wire nut. Hold this on here and alright. Okay, so make sure that's good and tight. One way to check your wires if they're tight, if they're not twisting all around, is to pull on them. If you pull on each one, make sure that they don't come out. You want to make sure there's no copper or anything kind of showing close by the edge of the wire nut. Now we just got to tuck everything in here. Like I said, now if you imagine if you had that switch in here, how would you fit it all in there? Make it pretty tough. I have seen a lot of people, if they take, they'll actually remove the smaller single switch and put in the bigger blank one, the 4x4, just so they have more room when they tuck everything in. It's not quite so crowded. So I'm going to go ahead and take the black here. Just tuck that in. And sometimes you just got to kind of see where everything fits and where you can kind of tuck it in without it untwisting or taking anything apart. Now, get that good in there. And I just like to kind of, before we put a blank cover on here, just kind of look everything over, make sure it looks good, and then you just got to throw a blank cover on that now. Okay, so we're almost done with the install. Now we got left is just to put on our blank cover. So if you didn't have one right away, you could probably put your light switch cover back on and maybe just put some tape on it until you can get a blank cover if you didn't have one handy. And like I said, just want to get everything tucked in. Put the cover on. Top and bottom started. There you go. So now we have our transfer switch here. It's in the off position. There's no power coming to our receptacles here. Everything's coming in here, going to here, and stopping. So after this, then you'd want to go turn on your circuit breaker. After you turn the circuit breaker on, if you hit your main line, which is your incoming line, the power's coming through here, coming back out, going into our furnace, feeding our furnace, and we'd have power here now. So since this is a mock-up, we can't do that. And that's it. And then when you have your generator power, you would plug that in right here. The light will turn on saying that there's power present from your generator or inverter. You'd switch that to the generator plug, and now you'd be feeding power to here and your furnace. And that's all there is to it. Hey, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know. Send me an email, and that's usually the best way to do it. If I get messages on YouTube with the videos, I don't get to those as fast as I do if you just send me an email directly. Alright, thanks again for watching, and you guys have a great day.